You are a failure, Mom. A complete and utter failure. Look at this house. Look at your life. I'm ashamed to tell my friends where you live. My daughter Chloe didn't yell. Her voice was cold, sharp, and perfectly steady. She stood in the middle of my small, cramped living room, surrounded by half-packed cardboard boxes. I was 57. I looked down at my worn-out sneakers, then at the faded kitchen counter. I felt a familiar ache in my chest, a physical weight that had been growing for 20 years. Before I could find the words to answer her, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text message from an unknown number. "The timer is up, Eleanor. If you don't sign the papers by Friday, he's coming to the house." My hand shook. I quickly locked the screen, hoping Chloe hadn't noticed the glow. "Aren't you going to say anything?" Chloe asked, crossing her arms. "Or are you just going to stand there like you always do? Dad would still be alive if it weren't for your constant mistakes." "Chloe, please," I whispered. "You don't understand the whole situation." "I understand perfectly," she snapped, grabbing her designer purse from the table. "Dad left us a successful family business, and you ran it into the ground within 5 years. You sold the suburban house. You forced me to take out student loans while my friends had everything paid for. And now you're selling this place too. Where is the money, Mom? Where did it all go?" If you want to hear more honest confessions like this one, take 5 seconds to subscribe to the channel. It really helps us share these untold stories. Chloe walked toward the front door. "Don't call me for Thanksgiving," she said without looking back. "I'm done carrying the weight of your poor choices." The front door slammed shut. The small house fell into a suffocating silence. I sat down on one of the taped boxes, the cardboard groaning under my weight. I reached into my pocket and pulled out an old, tarnished silver keychain. It had a small metal tag that read, "Arthur's Automotive." My late husband, Arthur, had been dead for 15 years. Everyone in our town remembered him as a local hero, a brilliant mechanic and a generous businessman who built a thriving repair shop from scratch. But as I stared at the keychain, my eyes drifted to the locked drawer of my old writing desk. The text message on my phone flashed again. 4 days, Eleanor. Don't make this difficult." The next morning, the bell above the door of Arthur's Automotive chimed. I was sitting behind the laminate desk in the small front office, reviewing the monthly utility bills. The numbers were entirely in the red. A man in a sharp gray suit walked in. It wasn't the person who sent the text, but it was someone just as dangerous. It was Marcus Vance, our accountant for the past decade. He didn't look at me. He looked at the stacks of folders on my desk. "Eleanor," Marcus said, removing his leather gloves, "I saw the MLS listing for your home. You're moving quickly." "I don't have a choice, Marcus," I said, keeping my voice level. "The shop needs another injection of capital. The suppliers are threatening to cut off our parts delivery." Marcus sighed, leaning against the counter. "You've poured over $300,000 into this garage since Arthur passed. A garage that, on paper, should be thriving. The bays are always full. The mechanics are always busy. Why are you hiding the profits, Eleanor?" I felt my throat tighten. "I'm not hiding anything. Inflation, rising labor costs." "Don't do that," Marcus interrupted gently, but his eyes were sharp. "I do your taxes. The revenue is there, but the cash vanishes from the business account every single month on the 14th. Electronic transfers to a private holding company called Apex Horizon. Who owns Apex Horizon, Eleanor?" I stood up, my knees trembling. "That is private family business, Marcus. If you aren't here to help with the supplier extension, I need to get back to work." Marcus looked at me for a long moment, a mixture of pity and frustration on his face. "Chloe called me yesterday. She asked if there was any trust fund left from her father. She thinks you spent it all on bad investments." "What did you tell her?" I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. I told her the truth about the accounts, that they are empty, but I didn't tell her why, because frankly, I don't know why. If you keep this up, she's going to legally contest your executorship of Arthur's estate. He left the office, the bell chiming mockingly behind him. I sank back into my chair. My gaze shifted to the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet. It required a separate key. I unlocked it and pulled out a weathered leather journal. It belonged to Arthur. I opened to a random page from 2009, just months before his sudden heart attack. The handwriting was erratic, hurried.
The pressure is too much. If they find out what happened in Chicago, everything is gone. The house, the shop, Chloe's future. I found a man who can make it go away, but his price is high. Eleanor says we should go to the police. She doesn't understand. The police will look at the ledger. They will see I started it. Suddenly, the landline phone on my desk rang, loud and jarring. I jumped, dropping the journal back into the drawer. I picked up the receiver. "Arthur's Automotive?" I said, trying to control my breathing. "Mrs. Vance?" a young woman's voice asked. She sounded professional, almost clinical. "This is Sarah from the billing department at Mercy General Hospital. We are reviewing some legacy accounts from 2010. We have an outstanding balance under your late husband's name, but the secondary contact listed is a Mr. Thomas Vance. We've been trying to reach him, but his number is disconnected." My breath hitched. Thomas? There is no Thomas in our family. "That's strange," the woman replied, the sound of keyboard clicks echoing through the line. "He signed the financial responsibility waivers for Arthur Vance's admission on October 12, 2010. And Mrs. Vance, the records show he wasn't a relative. He was listed as a private investigator." The room seemed to tilt. Arthur died in a car accident on October 14, 2010. Why was a private investigator signing hospital admissions 2 days before the crash? And why had I never heard the name Thomas Vance? "Mrs. Vance, are you still there?" the caller asked. "Yes. Can you email me those admission documents? I need to verify the signatures." "Of course. Sending them to your registered email now." I hung up the phone. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. A moment later, an email notification popped up. I opened the PDF attachment. There, at the bottom of the intake form, was Arthur's signature, shaky and faint, and right next to it was the signature of Thomas Vance. But it wasn't the name that caught my attention. It was the phone number listed next to his name. It was the exact same number that had texted me yesterday, threatening me to sign the papers by Friday. My phone buzzed again on the desk, as if it knew I was looking at it. 3 days, Eleanor. I saw the accountant leave the shop. Don't get smart. The truth about Arthur's accident stays buried as long as the transfers keep coming. I stared at the screen. For 15 years, I had been paying $50,000 a year to Apex Horizon, believing I was protecting my husband's memory and keeping my daughter's inheritance safe from a dark secret Arthur had taken to his grave. Arthur told me on his deathbed that he had made a terrible mistake in his youth, an accounting fraud that had ruined a business partner's life. He told me that if the partner's family found out, they would sue us for everything and ruin Chloe's chances at a normal life. But look at her life now. She hated me. She thought I was a failure. I was losing my home, my business, and my daughter's love to protect a dead man's reputation. I picked up my purse, locked the shop door, and drove straight to Chloe's apartment. I didn't care if she was angry. I needed to see her. I needed to look at her face and remind myself why I was enduring this nightmare. When I arrived at her building, I saw her car in the parking lot, but next to it was a sleek black luxury SUV. A man was standing by the driver's side door, talking to Chloe on the front steps. As I got closer, I recognized the sharp profile, the expensive leather gloves. It was Marcus Vance, my accountant. But Marcus didn't live in this neighborhood, and he certainly had no reason to be visiting my daughter at her private residence. They were arguing. Chloe looked upset, holding a thick manila envelope in her hands. I parked across the street, my heart hammering against my ribs. I rolled down my window slightly. The afternoon air was crisp, carrying their voices across the asphalt. "You don't understand, Chloe," Marcus was saying, his voice uncharacteristically tense. "Your mother is hiding something massive. If she sells the house, that cash is going to disappear just like the rest of it. You need to sign these papers to freeze the business assets before Friday." "I don't want to ruin her, Marcus," Chloe said, her voice shaking. She looked down at the envelope. "She's still my mother, despite everything." "She's destroying your father's legacy," Marcus snapped, taking a step closer to her. "Arthur worked himself to death for that shop, for you. Do you want to see everything he built go to some mysterious shadow company while your mother lives in a trailer?" Chloe bit her lip, tears glinting in her eyes. "Fine, give me the pen." "Stop!" I yelled, throwing my car door open. Both of them froze as I marched across the parking lot. Chloe's eyes widened in surprise, while Marcus's face instantly smoothed into a calm, professional mask. "Mom, what are you doing here?" Chloe asked, dropping her hand. "Marcus, step away from my daughter," I said, my voice shaking with a rage I hadn't felt in over a decade. "Eleanor, I'm just trying to protect Chloe's interests," Marcus said smoothly, putting his hands in his pockets. "As your accountant and a friend of Arthur's, I have a duty." "A duty to whom, Marcus?" I demanded, stopping right in front of them. "To Arthur or to Apex Horizon?" Marcus didn't blink. His expression remained perfectly calm, but I noticed a slight twitch in his jaw. "I don't know what you're talking about. I told you yesterday I don't know who owns that company." "Mom, what is Apex Horizon?" Chloe asked, looking between us, confused. "What is going on?" "Your father made mistakes, Chloe," I said, turning to her, my eyes tearing up. "But I spent 15 years trying to protect you from them, and this man has been using those mistakes to bleed us dry." Marcus laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Eleanor, you're becoming paranoid. The stress of the foreclosure is getting to you. Chloe, let's go inside and finish this." "No," I said. I pulled out my phone, opened the PDF from the hospital, and held it right in front of Marcus's face. "This is the intake form from the night Arthur died. The secondary contact was a private investigator named Thomas Vance. He used your private cell phone number, Marcus, the same number that has been texting me threats for 3 years. The parking lot went dead silent. The wind rustled the dry leaves on the pavement. Marcus looked at the screen. The professional mask finally slipped, replaced by a cold, calculating sneer. "You think you're clever, Eleanor?" Marcus whispered, his voice dropping an octave. "You think showing a piece of paper changes anything? If you stop the transfers, the documents go to the federal prosecutor. Arthur didn't just commit fraud, Chloe. Your beloved father framed his partner for arson to collect the insurance money that built that precious shop you're so proud of. The partner went to prison for 5 years. If that story hits the local news, your father's name is mud. Your degree, your reputation, gone." Chloe stumbled back a step, her face turning pale. "What? No, Dad wouldn't do that." "He did," Marcus said, turning his cold gaze to her. "And your mother has been paying me to keep it a secret since the day he died. She's not a failure, Chloe. She's just a very good shield. But the shield is about to break." Marcus reached out and snatched the manila envelope from Chloe's hand.
Friday, Eleanor. The final signature on the house sale or the faxes go to the DA's office and the local newspapers. Choose wisely." He turned on his heel, got into his luxury SUV, and drove away, leaving a cloud of exhaust in the chilly air. Chloe stood on the concrete steps, the wind whipping her hair across her face. She looked at me, her eyes wide, filled with a mixture of horror, confusion, and a sudden, terrible realization. "Mom, is it true?" "Let's go inside, Chloe," I said softly, my voice completely drained of strength. Inside her apartment, the silence was heavy. I sat on her sofa, holding a cold mug of tea she had made, but neither one of us had touched. I told her everything. I told her about the night Arthur confessed to me in the hospital, gasping for air as his heart failed. I told her how Marcus, who had helped Arthur cook the books years ago, showed up the next day with copies of the original ledger and the insurance reports. "He demanded $50,000 a year," I said, staring at the floor. "He said if I didn't pay, he would report the arson fraud. He said they would seize the shop, the house, and your college fund as restitution. You were 18, Chloe. You had just been accepted to your dream university. I couldn't let his sins ruin your life." Chloe was sitting on the floor across from me, her knees pulled up to her chest. Tears were streaming down her face. "So you let me believe you were incompetent?" she whispered, her voice cracking. "You let me call you a failure. You let the whole family think you lost the money. It was the only way to keep Marcus from looking deeper. If I seemed like a victim of bad luck and poor management, nobody questioned why the money was gone. If I fought him openly, he would have destroyed us out of spite." "But Mom," Chloe said, reaching out to touch my hand. Her touch was warm, shaking. "You're selling the house now. What happens when Matt money runs out? He's never going to stop." "I know," I said. I looked up at her, a strange sense of calm washing over me for the first time in 15 years. "That's why I'm not going to pay him anymore." "But the federal prosecutors, the news—" "Let them come," I said firmly. "Arthur is gone. He cannot suffer the consequences of his actions. But I am still here, and you are safe. You have your degree. You have your life. I have spent 15 years paying a dead man's debt. I am done." Chloe looked at me, and for the first time in a decade, I didn't see judgment in her eyes. I saw reverence. She leaned forward and wrapped her arms around my neck, burying her face in my shoulder. "I'm so sorry, Mom," she sobbed. "I'm so, so sorry for what I said." "I forgive you, sweetheart," I whispered, holding her tight. "But we have work to do. Marcus thinks he holds all the cards. He forgets that I was the one who managed the shop's physical records for 20 years. The next morning, Chloe and I didn't go to the police. We went to the old abandoned warehouse on the edge of town where the shop's archival records from the early 2000s were stored. It was a dusty, damp place filled with thousands of moldering banker boxes. "If Marcus was involved in the original fraud," Chloe said, lifting a heavy box down from a shelf, "there has to be a record of his signature on the corporate audits from that year." "Marcus was smart," I said, wiping dust from my glasses. "He used a shell company even back then, but he had a habit. He always used his middle name, Thomas, for his private accounts." We searched for 6 hours. My back ached and my lungs burned from the dust. Every box we opened seemed to contain nothing but old oil change receipts and part orders. I was beginning to lose hope. The Friday deadline was looming. It was already Thursday afternoon. Then Chloe cried out, "Mom, look at this!"
She was holding an old, faded manila folder labeled 1999 Tax Revisions. Inside was a single piece of carbon copy paper. It was a wire transfer authorization from the shop's primary account to an offshore bank in the Cayman Islands. The amount was $80,000, the exact amount of the insurance payout from the fire. And there, at the bottom of the page, authorized by the corporate accountant, was a signature of Marcus T. Vance. But right next to it, under the witness line, was another signature that made my blood run cold. It was the signature of the local fire marshal who had investigated the arson case 15 years ago. Marcus hadn't just discovered Arthur's crime. He had helped orchestrate it, bribed the investigator, and then used the evidence to blackmail my husband until the day he died, and then continued blackmailing me. "We have him," Chloe whispered, her eyes wide with shock. "This isn't just blackmail, Mom. This is conspiracy. He was an active participant in the original crime." My phone buzzed in my hand, a text from Marcus. 24 hours, Eleanor. I expect the signed deed of the house in my office by 5 p.m. tomorrow. Don't be late." I looked at Chloe. I didn't feel fear anymore. The heavy weight in my chest, the one I had carried for 15 years, suddenly vanished, replaced by a cold, sharp determination. "Call Marcus," I told Chloe. "Tell him we will meet him at the shop tomorrow at noon to sign the papers, and tell him to bring his ledger." At exactly noon on Friday, Arthur Vance walked into the front office of Arthur's Automotive. He looked victorious, holding a leather briefcase and a sleek pen. "Eleanor," he said, nodding to me. Then he noticed Chloe sitting in the corner, her laptop open on her lap. He frowned slightly. "Chloe, I didn't think you'd want to be here for the final liquidation of your mother's failures." "I wouldn't miss it for the world, Marcus," Chloe said smoothly. Her voice was steady, mimicking the cold tone she had used on me just days before. But this time it was directed entirely at him. Marcus set his briefcase on the desk and popped the latches. He pulled out a stack of legal documents. "This is the transfer of equity from the sale of your residential property. Sign here, Eleanor, and the Apex Horizon account will consider the annual debt settled." I didn't take the pen. I reached under the desk and pulled out the dusty carbon copy from 1999. I placed it gently on top of his legal documents. Marcus glanced down at it. His smile slowly faded. The color drained from his face so fast he looked almost ghostly under the fluorescent office lights. "Where did you get this?" he whispered, his hand hovering over the paper. "The archives, Marcus," I said, leaning forward, resting my hands on the desk. "You were very careful to hide your connection to Apex Horizon in recent years, but 15 years ago you weren't the sole owner. You were partners with Fire Marshal Higgins. You didn't discover Arthur's fraud, you planned it. You convinced him to do it because your own accounting firm was facing bankruptcy in 1999. "This doesn't prove anything," Marcus stammered, his professional composure completely shattering. "This is an old document. The statute of limitations on the arson is long gone." "The statute of limitations on arson might be over," Chloe spoke up from the corner, turning her laptop screen around to face him. "But extortion, money laundering, and tax evasion through a shadow company over the last 15 years, the FBI Financial Crimes Division is very interested in those. I already emailed a digital scan of this document to the regional DA's office 10 minutes ago. They're reviewing it right now." Marcus stared at the laptop screen. On it was an open email chain with the United States District Attorney's Office with a confirmation of receipt stamp. He looked at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of rage and terror. He reached out to grab the carbon copy, but I grabbed his wrist.
My grip was tight, fueled by 15 years of stolen peace. "It's over, Marcus," I said quietly. "Get out of my shop." He didn't say another word. He slammed his briefcase shut, shoved the unsigned papers inside, and practically ran out the front door, the bell chiming wildly behind him. 2 months later, the sign outside the garage was changed. It no longer read Arthur's Automotive. It now read Vance and Daughter Logistics. Marcus Vance was arrested 3 weeks after our confrontation. The federal investigation into Apex Horizon uncovered over $2 million in extorted funds from various small businesses in the county. He is currently awaiting trial, and his assets have been frozen. I did have to sell the house, not to pay Marcus, but to pay off the remaining legitimate suppliers and give the shop a fresh start. I moved into a small, sunlit apartment 3 blocks away from Chloe. It's small, and the kitchen counters are still a bit faded, but there are no packed boxes in the living room. There are no threatening text messages on my phone. Yesterday evening, Chloe came over for dinner. She didn't bring a designer purse, and she didn't look at my apartment with shame. She sat at my small table, helped me chop vegetables, and laughed at an old joke I used to tell when she was a child. Before she left, she noticed an old photograph of Arthur sitting on the mantelpiece. She looked at it for a long moment, then turned to me. "Do you miss him, Mom?" she asked softly. I walked over and stood beside her, looking at the face of the man I had sacrificed my middle age to protect. I didn't feel anger toward him anymore. I didn't feel the need to worship his memory either. He was just a human being who had made a terrible mistake and lacked the courage to face it. "I miss the man I thought he was," I said honestly, "but I love the life we have now much more." Chloe smiled, leaning her head against my shoulder. I didn't get revenge on Marcus. The law took care of that. And I didn't get my youth back. But as I looked around my quiet, peaceful apartment, holding my daughter's hand, I realized I had found something much more valuable. I had found the truth, and for the first time in 15 years, I could finally breathe.